Hello, and welcome back to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we're looking at the next maintenance update for Finale 27. That's 27.3, which was released recently. And yes, it'll JW change your life. So right now, up on the screen, I should be putting up the window that will appear when you're about to update to 27.3. It's just a nice little summary of all of the changes. And you'll see the first two is really the main things here, the JW plugins as well as the voiced linked parts. Below that, there's a bunch of other changes to plugins. Some of this is related to the continued work to update plugins and tools for use with SMuFL. So there's some of that as far in terms of the bug fixes and then other bug fixes that they've done. I should point out that this is the Mac version of this that you'll see. I believe there might be slight changes in the Windows version. There's always sometimes different bugs between Windows and Mac, so if you're on a Windows machine, you might see a couple different items there. But generally, this is what they've fixed and what they've added. And again, the JW plugins and the voiced linked parts is really the two big ticket items here. So let's talk about the JW plugins first. If you're unfamiliar with JW plugins is a set of plugins that was created by Jari Williamson many, many years ago that are just incredibly powerful. And I still have them on my computer. You can still run them alongside the new 27.3. And you'll see that that's where the JW plugins are. Finale has retooled 8 of them and actually called them JW tools instead. This is helpful because now I don't have 2 menu items called JW plugins. The JW tools is now the built-in Finale versions, and this window now, or this menu item in the plugins will now appear in every version of Finale from 27.3 onward, which is kind of amazing. And basically what Finale did was they've sort of absorbed 8 of these plugins that Jari originally wrote, absorbed them, updated them, fixed them. They were starting to get a little buggy. Jari has sort of retired from developing these plugins, and the last time that these were updated, I believe, was 2017. They're starting to get a little buggy with some of the new changes in Finale. Specifically with SMuFL, there's some of these plugins, there's certain parts of these plugins that won't work at all in a SMuFL file. So, Finale sort of retooled some of them to, not be as buggy and to work with SMuFL files. They will also still work with non-SMuFL files, the new versions of JW tools, so that's also really good as well. But anyway, the nice thing is that these 8 are now included. You don't have to go to a website and download them and do that whole thing. They're right there. They're ready for you out of the box. So I just want to do a very quick demonstration of 2 of them just so you can kind of see a little bit of the power that these things are if you're not familiar with them. So I've actually done videos on 2 of these, the JW copy part layout, and this is actually the same file that I used for that video. I believe it was spotlight number 5, so I'll put a link right about here so you can see the full video on that. But this one's really simple, and if you've got a part that's laid out already, like I've got my Flute 1 part that's ready to go, it's cast off the way I want, it's got multi-measure rests the way I want, it's got page breaks the way I want, all that stuff. And then you go to the Flute 2 part, and none of that stuff is done. It's just sort of raw data. There's no multi-measure rest, etc. It's all kind of a mess. Well, the JW copy part layout plugin, again, under JW tools, JW copy part layout, is really simple. All you do is, while you're looking at the unformatted part, the Flute 2 part, you choose the formatted part that you want to copy from in this window, and all you have to do, you do have the option of including multi-measure rests or not, and all you do is just press copy layout, and just like that, instantaneously, the layouts match exactly perfectly. I mean, the number of bars on each system is the same, the number of systems on each page is the same, the distance between each system is the same, everything, stuff that you probably won't even notice, like the margins, the page size, if they happen to be different for some bizarre reason, will all get redone so that they match exactly from one part to the next. It's really an incredibly time-saving tool that if you've never used this tool, you're probably looking at this with your jaw on the floor, wondering why you've been wasting so much time formatting every single part all the time. So again, the fact that this is now available to everybody out of the box is just incredible. So that's the JW copy part layout. You can see the full video if you want. And then the other one is the JW change plugin. which I've also done a video. I think this was the 11th Spotlight on Plugins video. So I'll put a link here as well, so you can go check that out. And this plugin is just super crazy. I mean, let's just go into here. JW Change. The amount of stuff that you can do with this plugin, and it's all categorized: accidentals, articulations, augmentation dots, beams, etc. All of these categories of things that you can do. And what you do is you just sort of open a category and you find out what you want to do. You want to resize your articulations, you want to change the horizontal position, vertical position, you want to clear the position, you want to delete. All of these options are available to you. And then within each option, I'm going to do something on this particular measure here. I'm going to delete some articulations, but not all of them. You have all of these filters at the bottom, which allow you to filter out for certain things. So in this case, I'm going to say I want to delete only the tenutos from this measure because I've decided that that's a silly way to write that. So I'm just going to choose articulation type and go to tenuto. And you can filter for in other ways too. Like you can just say only the ones on the beats. There's an opposite button here. So you could say on the beats opposite, which means that you're going to keep all the ones on the beats. You know, there's literally a million permutations for what you can do just with the filters. And then there's filters for every single category. The filters are actually a little bit different depending on which category you're in and what you're trying to do. But in this case, what I'm doing is articulations, deleting all entries, tenutos, and in all layers. You can do this from just a single layer or multiple layers or whatever you want. So, and all you do is hit apply and really delete, yes. And just like that, it got rid of the tenutos in that measure. So, this JW Change plugin is, I mean, the amount of stuff that you can do with this. If you're not familiar with this plugin, if you've never used this plugin, I mean, this is going to literally change your world. It is unbelievable. I always like to say, if Finale itself is sort of like a single-engine propeller airplane, JW Change is like strapping a warp drive onto the back of it. It's like that powerful. There's so much stuff that you can do here. In the video, I couldn't even scratch the surface of the amount of stuff that you can do with it. It would take me days to just get through everything. So, really, really incredible that JW Change is now updated for Finale. There are certain elements within JW Change that take advantage of font elements. So this was one plugin that needed to be updated so that it could use the SMuFL characters in a SMuFL file. And it's also bifurcated. So if you're in a non-SMuFL file, it will find the correct object in the non-SMuFL font as well. So that's really cool. So, it's great that these plugins are, available now. I'm talking about this on and on and on, and if you're not familiar with these JW plugins, maybe you're thinking I'm really overselling this, but I'm really not. For those of us that are quote unquote power users, these JW plugins are just we can't live without them. But for those of you that are not familiar with these, just having these at your fingertips and knowing that they're there and knowing what they can potentially do it's really a big deal. So I'm glad that they've done this. Yari is retired from developing these plugins. So there was a real danger that these were going to become obsolete, like they weren't going to work in the newer versions of Finale. So Finale recognized that the importance of these plugins and contacted him and asked him if they could take over the development of them, and they made a deal. And now we've got 8 of them. It's incredible. There's still, as you can see, there's still a lot more. Some of these are kind of, some of the functions of these have been kind of replaced by certain RGP Lua scripts now. So if you haven't seen the RGP Lua video I did, you can check that out. There's a bunch of things in the JW plugins that are now capable of doing in the Lua system. Some of these plugins, like the JW Yada Yada Tremolo plugin, this was something that was designed to fix a particular problem with the way that Finale put tremolos on stems. But that problem itself was fixed in a recent version of Finale. So actually, a plugin like this is no longer necessary. And there's other plugins here, like one I was looking at before was the Change Pitches plugin, which will literally change any pitch to any other pitch. You can change G sharp to A sharp, for example. There's other plugins. I think it's the TG Tools Replace Pitches. Basically does the same thing. So there is a little bit of crossover in some of these. Some of the Patterson plugins will do some similar things to the JW plugins. So, The good news is for those of us that rely on these JW plugins, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Some of this stuff is being duplicated in TG or Patterson or the RGP Lewis system. And now Finale is actually taking on some of these really important ones that we really can't do without. The one thing I really wish they would add to this list, and I'm really hopeful that they will, is the JW meter and rhythm. This is a really incredible plugin that does amazing things with relative meter changes and compound and all this stuff. Like, I use this sometimes. Like, I don't use this often, but when I need to use this, it literally saves me hours of work. So I really hope that this is hopefully the next one to get put into the hopper, as it were. So if they're listening, please do that one next. As I said, I've done a video on JW change. I've done a video on JW copy part layout. I'm not going to redo those videos because literally let me go back to the other file here. Literally the plugins are identical. So if I open the JW change from JW tools, I can actually open the JW change from the old JW change, the old JW plugins. They're literally exactly the same. Everything in here is exactly the same. The windows look exactly the same. There might be a slight difference in the font. I mean, it's barely noticeable, but it's literally exactly the same. So if you are familiar with these, that's good news. You don't have to worry about trying to, navigate your way through a different type of window or anything like that. Obviously, the big difference is that all of the bugs have been fixed, and all of the things that needed the SMuFL fonts to be fixed have been fixed as well. So, one other thing about this that I forgot to mention is that because they're built into Finale now, it's actually in the manual. So if you want to learn about these JW tools, you can find it in the manual, and you can sort of learn how to use the JW change from the manual if you want. Of course, I would always recommend learning how to use it from me, but it does exist if you have a question. They're not, it's not totally descriptive about how to use this, but it'll definitely give you some clues, and it will definitely be helpful. So yeah, that's the other thing about that. Now, the other major change that they've made to 27.3 is some vast improvements to the voiced linked parts system. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this, voiced linked parts is when you're sharing a staff for multiple instruments. Like you can see here, my flute 1 and 2 are sharing a single staff. And it's a little bit tricky when you're dealing with linked parts because you only want to show one of those lines on the linked part at a time. So you have to go through this system called voiced linked parts, which exists in the manage parts. And for the instrument that you're looking at, you basically, for flute 1 and flute 2, you're using the same staff, but you're using this specify voicing window, which sets up a whole series of logic about how it chooses which note to put into the staff. You can see that I'm asking it to put the first note from the top into this particular part, including single note passages, and if it contains multiple layers, to use layer 1. This is the flute 1 part, which is displaying the shared flute 1 and 2 staff. This system is incredibly complicated. I did a demonstration of this in video 23-4, which I'll put a link to here as well. I go really into depth about how to use this. Interestingly, have always been historically a lot of problems with this. It's difficult to use. It's difficult to understand the logic, but there's also technical difficulties relating to music spacing, grace notes, using the special tools and all that stuff, which has really hamstrung the ability to use this system for shared staffs in Finale. So the other half of 23-4, I spend talking about how to not use this system to show to use shared staffs in the score, while creating dummy staffs for flute 1 and 2 in this case that are hidden in the score but are being used for the linked parts without using this this voicing system. So that whole video is bifurcated, showing you one way to do it and showing you the other way to do it. The reason why you have to do it the other way is because of a lot of limitations that the voiced part system puts on you, particularly with the logic of it, but even more importantly with some technical aspects that don't allow you to make certain changes when you really need to. All of that, or most of that, has been fixed in 27.3. This is a long time coming. So essentially, this is going to make using that voiced linked part system a little bit more appealing and a little bit more feasible. Not completely, because still getting around the logic of how to put the notes in and everything is still difficult, and sometimes it's just it's simply not worth figuring out. It's just easier to parse it out into separate staffs. So it's not a silver bullet, but it's definitely a step in the right direction to make this a little bit easier. Two of the major issues with this has always been grace note spacing and spacing of seconds. So I've set up flutes 1, 2, 3, and 4 here in a specific way to show you what happens here. You can see that, in cases like this, sometimes the grace notes don't behave the way that you want to. And the way to fix this really is to go into the special tools, into this note position tool, and click in the measure for layer 2, and I can kind of line up my grace note to where it needs to be, right? And basically what you're doing is you're introducing a manual position change to the grace note. The problem is that the voice linked part systems don't have access to the functionality of the special tools. So whenever you did that, this grace note spacing would follow the score. Now, if I look at it in the part, I'm saying, well, okay, it's too far now. So I would have to go back and change that. But previous to 27.3, I couldn't use this tool at all. But in 27.3, I can now go into the part and move that grace note. Let me zoom in a little bit here for you. I can go into the part and move that grace note, and you'll see that it turns orange, which is, you'll be familiar with, it's unlinking, so that you can now actually unlink the position of that grace note, which is incredible. I mean, this was never possible in previous versions of Finale. You can see that this one here is just too far away, so we can kind of move it here without affecting the score. And now it just works, So this is incredible that they were able to do this. The other issue had to do with seconds. If you had seconds across multiple layers in Finale, again, it's a little bit technical, but what Finale does is it automatically introduces a manual positioning change to the layer 2 notes. I actually talked about this recently in the music spacing category, having to do with seconds and unisons and all that stuff. Again, the problem was because the voice linked parts weren't able to access the position of the notes like they're supposed to. Finale would leave, sorry, getting to the right part there. Finale would leave the position of these layer 2 notes too far to the right, so there'd be sort of this awkward space. Now you can see that they're orange, and I haven't done anything to this measure. It's orange, saying that Finale has fixed this, meaning that it's put it back into its original position. In fact, if you go into this position tool here, got to be in layer 2, and right click and choose relink to score, you'll see it actually move off to the right, because it's now taking on the position of where it is in the score, which is compensating for the fact that there's a note here with a stem going upward, so it has to be pushed off to the right. And we can just fix that, remove manual adjustments. Again, it was a manual adjustment that was doing that. So now it's putting it back in its position where it's supposed to be. So this has always been a problem with voiced linked parts, and now it's not. Now, basically, the reason why both of these things are possible with the seconds and with the grace notes is that Finale has basically allowed these voice-linked parts to access the functionality of the special tools, or I should say most of the special tools. I'll talk about that in a second. For whatever reason, previous to 27.3, these special tools were just not functional in voice-linked parts. I don't know if it had to do with when they developed the voice link part system, they ran out of time and couldn't get these to work in voice link parts, or if there was some technical difficulty in the code that they couldn't overcome. Whatever the case may be, they've finally overcome that, and most of these tools now work. I have a suspicion that part of what happened is that some of the JW Change plugins actually require the use of the special tools, and I think that they were, in their testing, I think they were realizing that it wasn't working on the voice link part, so they kind of dug a little deeper and recognized that this is a problem. I mean, there's many of us that could have told them that this was a problem a long time ago, but but anyway, they have fixed it, and now they've made it possible to use most of these special tools in voice-linked parts. Now, I say most because there are still a couple tools that don't work. I don't know why. I don't know, again, if it's just they didn't quite have time to do it yet. But, for example, the accidental mover tool still doesn't work in a voice-linked part. You can see that it actually won't move the accidental. There's a few others here that are kind of similar for whatever reason, just don't work in a voice-linked part when they normally would work in a linked part. So again, hopefully this is step one. Maybe they're going to expand this a little bit. But most of these tools will work. So if you need to, do something with your secondary beam angle, this is a voice linked part that I'm looking at, and I just changed it. So it's totally possible to do that. I can change the angle. Some of these things, by the way, are linkable and unlinkable anyway. So you just saw the secondary beam angle didn't unlink. That's by design. You can't actually, that's something that can't be unlinked anyway. But yeah, I mean, most of it works. I'm probably going to do a addendum video to that category. I believe it was the category 2024. I think there was 14 videos in that, so I'll probably just do an addendum video that kind of spells out, how these things work now in voice-linked parts. One thing I remember saying in the introductory video is that many of these special tools will work in linked parts. Some of them still don't work in linked parts, just out of necessity anyway, and those ones that never had worked in a linked part still won't work in a voiced linked part. But there are certain ones that always worked in a linked part that still don't work in a voiced linked part. So hopefully I'll try and figure out how to summarize that in a way that makes sense for everybody. I mean, I don't know how important that is, but I think it would be clever to kind of have that spelled out a little bit. But yeah, so I'll probably try and do an addendum video on that soon. But yeah, so that's the gist of it. Like I said, JW plugins, voice linked part improvements. It's definitely a big deal for some of us. It's sort of been par for the course with these maintenance updates. Some of these things seem more important to other people. I think with the addition of the JW tools now, I really think this is pretty universal. Like, if you're not familiar with these, you may be wondering what's the point, but once you actually understand what these things can do, you'll start to understand what the point is. So hopefully this is one of those updates that will be valuable for every Finale user in one way or another. And certainly for us power users, the improvements to the voice link part system is very welcome. So yeah. All right, so there you go. That's the 27.3 update. I got nothing more to say about that. I feel like I've said a lot already. So once again, thanks for watching. My name is Jason. As always, please, please, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you soon on the next video.